People in positions of power love to propagate conspiracy theories. It's a hallmark of how powerful politicians, journalists, economic elites consolidate their own power by convincing the public that various events which unfold are the product of some craven conspiracy. And the most obvious and blatant example of the past several years has to be the Trump-Russia conspiracy. As you know, if you'd followed my commentary and reporting on that subject from the beginning, it was pretty blatantly obvious all along that the entire notion of a grand geopolitical conspiracy to thwart or subvert the 2016 election was not some rationally grounded, dispassionate theory that journalists had come up with. It was a result of an overblown, emotionalistic, and lazy reaction to events that unfolded, which is why they posited that conspiracy theory and why it blew up in their face. Although they've gone about their merry way for the most part and hardly even acknowledge now that what they were promulgating was in fact a conspiracy theory, almost in a traditional sense. The idea was that Trump conspired with the Russian state to illegitimately secure victory in the 2016 election, which Robert Mueller himself did not establish and actually affirmatively debunked in numerous respects. Anyway, it just goes to show you how selective and disingenuous the application of the term conspiracy theory often is. Huge segments of the political media class bought in hook, line, and sinker to a particular favored conspiracy theory over the past 3 years, and they still, in many senses, continue to promulgate it. But you'll find now that anybody who proposes a even mildly sinister explanation for why the most notorious sex criminal in the country was suddenly found dead under, to put it mildly, suspicious circumstances, those people will generally be denigrated as conspiracy theorists. They're off their rocker. We should sit back and just accept what the official story is at this juncture, even though we don't have really an official story. All we have is anonymous officials stating that there was an apparent suicide. And if there's anybody in the country that a wide variety of powerful officials would want to see deposed or disposed in this way, it's Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, the minute he was arrested, you knew that there was a decent chance that either he would personally commit suicide or there'll be some foul play involved to end his life. And therefore, you would expect him to be under extraordinary supervision. And yet we have now multiple sources, including the Associated Press and NBC, reporting that shortly before, we don't know the exact time frame yet, obviously, but shortly before Epstein was found dead, he was taken off suicide watch. Why would that be the case? Obviously, many questions are open on this matter. Bill Barr himself released a statement this morning saying that he finds it appalling that this took place. And yet I see already this meme going around that Bill Barr somehow facilitated the apparent suicide. Who knows? You're going to get conspiracy theories flying in a variety of directions. I'm also not asserting that the Clintons somehow orchestrated this either. I'm simply stating that it should not be at all surprising that people instinctually reject the notion that we should just meekly sit back and accept that this took place under circumstances that pass the smell test. Conspiracy theories have happened throughout history, and almost whenever the word conspiracy theory or the phrase is always leveled to delegitimize legitimate inquiries into suspicious official behavior. Now, are some people genuinely cranks in terms of propagating all kinds of bonkers conspiracy theories? Yeah, if you spend any time at all on the internet, you will come across those people. But that doesn't mean that it's not worth interrogating whether there would be some kind of corrupt motive behind this individual no longer being alive. And this is going to be one of those mysterious deaths that people debate probably till the end of time. Now, apparently there were cameras that were supposed to have been recording in the cell that he was in. Whether those cameras will be turned over to the proper authorities and whether what was recorded will be publicly revealed, we do not know. But there were a lot of people who would prefer for Epstein to not be in a position where he can reveal further damaging information on his interactions with them, because simply the accusation, even if it's not fully substantiated, and I think, if somebody just capriciously tries to tie you to Epstein and you genuinely didn't do anything wrong in terms of predation of minors, then you have a legitimate grounds to be upset about that and to find it unreasonable to you and to your reputation. But even the mere accusation is enough, where if you have to go out into the media now and deny that, yeah, maybe you met Epstein one or two times or whatever, but you had no idea that he was involved in this alleged sex trafficking, that in and of itself is very harmful to your reputation. And others were just implicated in this 2 days ago. Bill Richardson, the former governor of New Mexico, apparently had interactions with Epstein because Epstein had a property in New Mexico. And Richardson strenuously denies that he had any involvement whatsoever in any illicit sexual activity. But the fact that he has to come out and make that denial is itself really damaging. So even if you don't regard yourself as implicated in any of these criminal acts, just the mere association in public is enough for you to want to take some serious steps to stifle any release of information that might not be 100% accurate, but still could be reputationally damaging. And so people are right to be suspicious about this kind of death, because there are a lot of powerful people who are very unnerved about what might come out in terms of Epstein himself revealing information or any records that Epstein might possess being released. Now, there's an additional angle here, because there were news reports shortly after Epstein's most recent arrest that Alex Acosta, who had been Secretary of Labor in the Trump administration and was the person who brokered the non-prosecution deal with Epstein's attorneys in 2007, news reports indicated that Acosta, in his discussions with Trump transition officials in 2016, said that Epstein, quote, belonged to intelligence. And Acosta was told to back off and strike the non-prosecution deal. Told by whom? We don't know. But there is good reason to believe that Epstein's powerful connections extended not just to prominent political officials, not to Donald Trump, not to Bill Clinton, not to Harvard professors, etc., but to intelligence agencies. We know that Epstein had extensive dealings in Israel, Ehud Barak, who is now challenging Netanyahu in the upcoming Israeli election, had to go through several weeks of controversy due to his past associations with Epstein. And I personally believe that more will come out on this subject, given other things that I have heard, but am not in a position at this juncture to publicly state, because I like to be judicious as to whether information that you come across in a reportorial process ought to be publicly stated. But which is all just to say that there's a very good chance that more along those lines will be coming out. Now, can you connect that definitively to the sudden death? No. But you can connect it to why there's such a widespread public skepticism about the circumstances of this death. It's perfectly legitimate. So the idea that people are poo-pooing the immediate impulse toward a conspiracy theory type response just totally misses why there is such widespread skepticism of powerful institutions in the first place. That skepticism is well-founded, given how those institutions tend to operate. If you're not skeptical of those institutions, then you're not doing your job, especially if you're a journalist. And if you are a journalist, then you should feel pretty embarrassed that random people on the internet tend to be more skeptical of those institutions than you. Should you always be guided by a fidelity to the facts? Yes, of course. But in terms of your initial instincts, those, I think, should always be one of extreme skepticism. There have been reports that the Manhattan detention facility where Epstein was housed is actually more stringent and more heavily surveilled than Guantanamo Bay. And that's according to news reports quoting an individual who happened to have been housed in both Guantanamo Bay and this Manhattan facility. So we're not going to hear the end of this anytime soon. You have guys like Joe Scarborough, who is the go-to TV pundit for basically the entire non-conservative political class, and even many conservatives view him as like the supreme arbiter of all that is correct and right in the world. You have him suggesting that somehow this was a Russian op, and yet that's not a conspiracy theory. It's not a conspiracy theory to, without any evidence whatsoever, somehow bring in Russia. But you are a deranged conspiracy theorist if you think that there was foul play involved in, having to do with other intelligence agencies, or perhaps directed by powerful figures who do not want Epstein to reveal any more damaging information. And so, in terms of the pantheon of suspicious deaths that have occurred throughout history and are still debated, this one's going to be way up there. And the idea that anybody should be chided for having a explanation at the top of mind that is perhaps a little bit sinister should not be called some kind of crank. The reasons for their skepticism ought to be taken seriously, because these institutions have given us every reason to believe that they act in a suspicious manner. Now, is there just kind of more widespread, banal, systemic corruption and incompetence in especially the U.S. prison system? Sure. That's why if you're in prison and you have the right amount of resources, you can get drugs, you can get cell phones, you can get other contraband. That happens every single day. And if you're in the right circumstances, you can kill yourself. However, the corruption that's sort of inherent in the U.S. prison system also lends itself to various plots being hatched to do away with people who are considered inconvenient. Am I asserting that that happened here? No, but I'm asserting that the widespread bipartisan misgivings about the nature of what occurred here are perfectly predictable and also well-founded. And you even have Carol Lonig of the Washington Post stating this morning, people close to Epstein fear he was murdered. As Epstein told authorities, someone tried to kill him in a previous incident weeks earlier. He was described as being in good spirits in recent days. So remember, on July 23rd, there was an incident where Epstein appeared to have had bruising on the neck. And although that had the indicia of a suicide attempt, it was never confirmed that that was actually a suicide attempt. And the true nature of what happened on that date was never seemingly revealed, at least publicly. And that just heightens the reasons for skepticism in terms of why he was not on 24-hour suicide watch, given that he experienced this unexplained either attack or suicide attempt 2.5 weeks ago. Why? Why would Epstein, who is of such high profile and of such broader political and social significance, why would not extra effort be made to monitor him at all times? Much less take him off of suicide watch unexpectedly, after which a suicide purportedly takes place. I mean, if you're not skeptical of that, then what are you skeptical of? Because that's on its face massively suspicious. I think you can be skeptical to the extreme about what happened here without necessarily reverting to kind of simple partisan explanations. I hear people automatically saying there was a Clinton hit, or there are people saying that, Trump orchestrated it through Bill Barr. I mean, to the extent that conspiracies do take place, it's usually not as reducible to a simple, nakedly partisan political motive as that. I would take a look at the foreign intelligence angle. And remember, foreign intelligence actors tend to interface with American intelligence actors. I think that's the angle that will have to be explored much more in depth to fully understand what's going on. And you almost miss that if you dwell too excessively on the Clinton/Trump angle. Although it's true that Epstein had dealings with all these powerful people across party lines. And if that's not going to occasion major skepticism, nothing will. Because people just assume that these elites act in incomprehensibly sleazy ways behind closed doors. And they're usually correct to at least have that suspicion, although sometimes it can get a little out of control and people get ahead of themselves and launder wild speculation that's untethered to the facts. But the facts here are sufficient to operate from a baseline of skepticism. Now we're going to go through a process where his assets are going to have to be dispensed with, where his records are going to continue to come out. There's actually even a decent chance that some of the records that have been concealed up until this point and were only coming out incrementally can now be released more expeditiously because he's deceased. So that kind of militates against this notion that he was killed in order to suppress information, because his death potentially makes it more likely that this damaging information is going to come out more quickly. So who knows? We shall see. All right, everybody. Wanted to give you a quick update on this story because I know people are intensely interested in it, as am I. How can you not be? And we shall see what happens going forward. Have a nice day.